Robert's story of the history of the loss of streetcars, as he knows, of course, was a story told right across North America. There were wonderfully operating streetcars in cities from Los Angeles to Toronto and everywhere in between, and they were deliberately upgraded through a combination of criminal conspiracy and clever marketing by General Motors. And some people went to jail, clearly not enough, but anyway, moving along. What happened, of course, was a deliberate effort, and it involved, this is not just conspiracy theory talk, this is history, to remake the model of a city from what works for the people who live in the city to what works for the people who make cars. It was as clear as that. And the things that worked for the people who made cars, and the reason that it worked to tell them to tear up the streetcars was that General Motors said, if you get rid of your streetcars, we will give you free buses. That was the deal. We'll provide free bus service for your community, and then gradually the free buses disappeared, but the streetcars were gone, and in many cities they just never came back. If you look at the smart transportation cities of the world and ask what they have in common, and two cities come to mind because they happen to have brilliant transportation design. And they're very, very different culturally, and they're very different in terms of how they arrived and where they are. But Curitiba, Brazil, and Amsterdam spring to mind. And Curitiba, Brazil was a dirt poor city in Brazil, where the mayor's concern was initially for low-income people. How do we get the problem of people who can't afford a car, how do they get from A to B? What can we do to make the bus system work for them? And then he paired that up with, well, maybe they can collect some of the garbage supplies by the side of the road, and we can pay them for recycling, we'll pay them in bus tickets. It was a really innocent, one-idea, original approach, which led to, over time, the development of one of those brilliant bus-derived systems that actually has created Curitiba as a city with such high quality of life that it's a magnet for corporate headquarters, for investments, it's where people go. It revolutionized and changed Curitiba from a dirt poor city that's nowhere to a real mecca of high quality of life. They do stuff like along the corridor that nobody pays for the bus ticket on board. They have elevated platforms, indoor waiting. You've got your ticket, you swarm on, you swarm off. And the major bus hubs include things like daycare centers, showers and gyms and lockers, so that urban downtown young people can decide they're going to finish their day at work, shower, change, and go right back out to the bars and clubs without going home. There's all kinds. This is what they did. They designed the city for what people need, not for what cars need. Look at the other end of the world. You look at Amsterdam, which is, of course, within a culture that once dominated through colonial period great parts of the world. But Amsterdam now is an extremely livable city because of its transportation. It focuses on that you work in a hierarchy. So you've got your sidewalks and your pedestrians. Pedestrians first, look both ways, goes the bikes. There's bikes going this way, there's bikes going that way, and they have their own light system. They're very safe, and the people of Amsterdam ride around on bikes like you wouldn't believe. No helmets, small children on handlebars, everybody's luggage. It is so common, absolutely everyday way of getting around, and it's safe. That's why they don't have helmets, because they're not dodging traffic. They've got two-way traffic, and then you've got the streetcar system in the middle. Some places you've also got the canals, and you've got one lane for cars. One lane going one direction. Because no one but a fool would want to drive a car in Amsterdam, because you've got the streetcar, you got the bikes, and you got the sidewalk. So how do we do that in Canada? Why do we have dumb transit in Canada? One reason is we're the only country in the OECD with no transportation policy. None. And the OECD, for those of you who don't know, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is basically the club of rich countries. It's the industrialized one. So we are the only one in that club that doesn't have a transportation policy. And no surprise, we're also the only one that does not have dedicated federal dollars to mass transit. charges you if you bring your car into the city. We talk about smart technology. In Singapore, they read the barcode as it goes by, and if you get the bill at the end of the month if you brought your car into the city during rush hour versus off hours, and there's a differential billing system that's just based on reading the barcodes and the license numbers. Portland, Oregon has approached it a different way, which is to make parking more expensive. So as more and more and more of the surface area of the city is dedicated to people and not cars, parking areas shrink and the cost of parking your car goes up. Those things are then used as sources of municipal funds to expand and improve the transit system. Just saying, that's some of the ways that we also can look at the full picture. Well, I'm going to try to pick a couple of these questions and answer them quickly. I've started with yours about the picture. Yes, beyond no city should be planning its transit plan in isolation from the areas around it, the nearby cities and nearby provinces. So that's what I meant by the problem of having a federal government that has no transportation policy. Transportation policy is just the way there are many areas where we don't have an energy policy either. We don't have arts and culture policy. We don't have a literacy policy. You get the drift. But if we had such an overarching policy, the idea is that you try to get policy alignment where municipalities, provinces, and federal government are all working in the same direction to deliver this policy. So in the same way that you have intermodal connectivity within a city to make it work perfectly well, you also want to have that transport link so that what happens when we have lousy train service is that we get people building bigger and bigger airports and more people flying. And that is the very worst choice of transportation if you're concerned about greenhouse gases per passenger mile. High-speed rail is about your best. So if we can start looking at this, and if we talk about the density issues, Canada wasn't denser when we had better train service. You used to be able to take trains to all parts of this province and other provinces, and you can't take a train today from Edmonton to Calgary, and that's one of the routes that even the Conference Board of Canada says would be a place that would sustain high-speed rail for profit. Listen to the words politicians use when they talk about where you're putting your money. They traditionally will say we have to invest in highways, but can we afford to subsidize rail? Well, it's a subsidy to cars, it's a subsidy to trucks, it's a subsidy to highways, and there's a cost to that. And the more that we have decided that we've talked about moving people on land, but when we're talking about between cities, we're also talking about moving goods. And we've moved our goods off trains and onto our highways, which is why the highways don't last as long as they used to do. Those we don't have warehouses anymore. The warehouses are on the trucks and they're moving around on the roads that we're paying for. And they do a lot of damage. So that's a large-scale question of where you're project, when the contract is let, where it is, if it's been spent well. Harper has designed an infrastructure program where the money will never be tracked, even in forensic accounting, when it's all over.
This could be enough for an election.
Yeah. Well, with the benefit of another minute, I think what I'd like to do is draw your attention to the importance of climate action coming up. The climate issue has been interwoven with a lot of what we've talked about in terms of reasons to get away from a car-based transit system. But just to focus a bit, this October 10th, there is another citizen-based grassroots global effort to draw attention to climate action. It's being organized by 350.org. Those of you who are nodding, remember that they organized the October 24th last year Global Day of Action on Climate. This is called Get Back to Work, 10-10-10, 10th day, 10th month, 2010, which